يتحاصروا. شوف النار.
After an American oil tanker erupted in flames in the northern Persian Gulf within Iraqi waters following an Iranian missile attack, a combat alert was immediately declared aboard the U.S. aircraft carriers operating throughout the region. The reaction was swift and decisive as vertical launch systems on the escorting warships opened and Tomahawk cruise missiles started launching toward Iranian positions one after another, shooting from the decks and cutting through the sky toward the distant horizon. Throughout the carrier strike group, sailors and troops quickly moved into their defensive stations positioned around the entire perimeter of the vessels. Weapons lockers were unlocked, gear was handed out, and every post was rapidly occupied, while snipers positioned themselves with precision rifles on elevated platforms along the superstructure to monitor any potential threats. On the carrier's lower deck, Marines gathered together and received a rapid operational briefing as they prepared for immediate deployment to Allied bases across the Middle East, knowing they had to be ready to move without delay. Commanding officers quickly outlined the mission objectives, transportation plan, destination, and procedures to follow upon arrival, delivering the critical information in just a few minutes before the troops prepared to execute their orders. On the upper deck, gun crews began loading ammunition belts into the ship-mounted machine guns positioned along the railings as the belts were carefully fed through the receivers. Charging handles were pulled back and the weapons were armed and ready. Troops carrying shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missile systems climbed to the higher decks and established their positions, watching the skies from every possible direction, while the entire horizon remained under constant surveillance with binoculars, scanning from left to right and sniper scopes tracking any movement on the sea or in the air. Once the machine guns were loaded and secured, the gunners conducted test bursts, firing short controlled rounds into open water to verify the weapons were cycling smoothly, feeding correctly, and fully prepared to defend the carrier from a potential aerial strike as empty brass shells clattered across the metal deck plates, confirming the guns were functioning perfectly and that every weapon across every vessel in the formation was operational, placing the entire strike group at maximum combat readiness. Beneath the flight deck, maintenance crews had already been preparing the fighter jets as missiles were attached to the pylons. Fuel tanks were completely filled, avionics systems tested, and control surfaces carefully inspected, and after a thorough check, the first aircraft rolled forward, an AV-8B Harrier II, with the pilot taxiing to the runway, pushing the engine to higher power, and launching from the deck before leveling out and rapidly climbing into the sky. Behind the Harrier FA-18 Super Hornets began moving onto the flight deck one after another, each one connecting to the catapult, accelerating to full engine power, and blasting off the bow of the carrier before climbing into the air and turning toward their designated patrol sectors as the pilots were assigned three main objectives. First, intercept and destroy any incoming missiles that might threaten the carrier strike group. Second, establish air superiority along the route the Marines would use to reach Allied bases, ensuring secure passage for transport aircraft. And third, strike hostile military targets such as radar installations, missile launch platforms, command centers, and any assets posing a danger to coalition forces in the region. Meanwhile, on the carrier deck, the Marines moved toward the V-22 Ospreys parked in the A section, boarding through the rear ramps in single lines before taking their seats and securing their harnesses as the Ospreys powered up their engines with rotors spinning in helicopter mode and lifting off the deck one by one, the rotors tilting forward as they accelerated and headed toward Allied bases where the Marines would be deployed. Another group of Marines boarded a Marine transport helicopter through its side door, carrying full combat equipment, including rifles, body armor, packs, and ammunition, and the helicopter soon lifted off following the same route as the Ospreys toward the same operational zone. Meanwhile, back on the ship, defensive measures continued without pause, as every machine gun position was inspected again and anti-aircraft missile teams verified their systems were tracking targets and ready to fire at any moment while attack helicopters positioned on the flight deck were armed with door-mounted machine guns and loaded with ammunition for escort operations, preparing to fly alongside the Ospreys and transport helicopters carrying the Marines while providing armed protection for the entire formation. And if Iranian drones appeared along the flight path, the helicopter gunners would engage and destroy them before they could approach the transport aircraft. As the carrier strike group remained on full combat alert with every weapon manned, every radar system scanning, and every aircraft either already in the air or standing by ready for immediate launch.